r/AskReddit. Teachers of Reddit, what was the biggest student meltdown you ever witnessed? I'm a teacher and have been teaching for 15 years. Last year, two 7th grade students were talking smack to one another. When it came time to switch classes, the one boy, Denny, walked up and slapped the other, Timmy. I was standing right next to them and thought that he just slapped books out of Timmy's hand because Timmy dropped his books when Denny slapped him. I then stepped between Denny and Timmy because I know if Denny starts a physical fight with Timmy, I won't be able to separate them. Just as I'm trying to talk Denny down and move him away from Timmy, he loses it and my coworker has to put him in a hold. I immediately tell Timmy to get into my room so he is safe. Meanwhile, my coworker is wrestling with Denny outside of my room. Denny is desperately trying to get into my room to get it to me. Normally, I would have just locked the door and been done with it. However, I was using the laptops and there wasn't enough plugs in my classroom, so I had the cart in the room, but it was plugged in at the outlet outside my room. So there I am, holding the door closed because it wouldn't lock with the cord in the way, all while my coworker is still wrestling with Denny. Finally, I force the door to latch and can lock it. I turned around and my class is just staring at me in disbelief and stunned silence. At that point, I recommended that we try some of the breathing exercises my student teacher had taught them that morning. We all laughed, except Timmy. He was freaking out, sobbing and shaking. By this time, Denny had been subdued and moved to a new location. My principal comes to my room to find Timmy freaking out and we have to clear the room because he refused to move or respond to our directions. It was one of the craziest days in my career. On a side note, my coworker who had to put the student in a hold had thrown out his back the day before and couldn't even bend down to tie his shoes. I have no idea how he was able to wrestle with this kid for several minutes. I'm thankful he was there or it may have been a very different situation. We were on a class trip on the way back to school when one of my colleagues pointed to a boy who was leaning against the subway doors, upset about something. I walked over and learned he had left his backpack at the movie theater and was very upset. I tried to encourage him, but he didn't care. Eventually we are at our train stop and everyone is getting off, but this kid is still leaning against the subway doors. Opposite side had opened. Doors are about to close and only he and I remain from our group. I tell him please don't freak out, but I'm gonna take you off the train, we have to go. He immediately starts struggling, but I'm a big guy, so I get him off. As train starts pulling away he is trying to walk back towards it and we are all like WTF, be careful, train is pulling out of station. Eventually I grab him and drag him backwards to the ground and yell at co-workers to get kids out of here. As they are walking away he is trying to crawl towards the open subway tracks, presumably to kill himself. This kid is 12 and I'm a giant man, but I'm struggling to subdue him. I wrestled in high school, so I know how to keep control of someone on the ground, but he is really determined to get to those tracks. I'm still struggling with him, and another train comes by, but I keep him on platform. People are by now asking him if he is okay and eyeing me like WTF are you doing to this child? Eventually I yell to my coworker to go get the police and she runs off in tears. Now I'm alone struggling with this child on the ground and I assume it's about to get real, but as soon as he hears mention of police he starts calming down and begs me to let him go, promising to be good. After a minute of not letting go I talk him into standing up with me and I take him away while aggressively holding his hand and putting my arm around him. We breathlessly walk into school and I immediately take him to main office where a small crisis team has gathered. Once he is safely sitting in a chair I collapse into one as well and start processing my ordeal. His family comes to school to pick him up, but we have to mandatorily send him to hospital for psychiatric evaluation. Couple days later he is back in school like nothing ever happened. We had a special bond after that, and he always came to my classroom to check on me all year, even though I wasn't his teacher. I don't work at that school anymore, but I'm heading back at end of this year to see those students graduate and hope to find him happier and healthier. Hoo boy. I used to work after school and summer kids activities programs, and there was always something Probably the one that was saddest and most affecting to me was the little girl who had been abandoned by both her parents, drugs yay, and was living with her grandma and her severely disabled and handicapped older brother that required 24/7 care. Her grandma was kind and supportive, but had her hands full with the brother and just couldn't give this girl what she needed. No one could. The girl was always sweet and well behaved until something minor would happen to upset her equilibrium, like she'd play catch and miss the ball a few times, or she'd paint something and get a paint stain on her shirt, and then the 180-degree switch to raging hell demon. Most of the time she'd turn her rage and pain on herself. On a field trip she lost a coloring book and responded by bashing her face into a wall until my assistant physically pinned her down on the floor. Another day she got paint on her hat and responded by raking her nails down her face and across her arms until we restrained her and screaming herself hoarse. Every single day at lunch she had to be coaxed to eat anything at all. Her pain was so present and huge, though usually well masked. Sometimes some unwitting kid would get in the way and she would just go feral and start screaming and biting. I dunno. She was, most of the time, such a lovely and good-hearted little person. It was heartbreaking. I wanted to sweep her up and take all her pain away, or shoot her damn selfish loser parents, though they had probably done the best thing for her under the circumstances. It's been at least 10 years. I still think about her and hope she's okay. Applicable repost. I used to teach at a temporary education facility for kids who were deemed too dangerous to be mainstreamed into schools / kids who were awaiting or had just been released from incarceration. Most of the kids were just horrendously underprivileged, but some were violent and some were mentally challenged or mentally ill and had been placed in our school. We had a kid who I'm going to call Kevin who fell into the category of being pretty severely mentally challenged. He was 13, morbidly obese, and nearly 6 feet tall. In one-on-one teaching situations or situations where he was surrounded by a few of our more diligent kids, he was actually really great to work with and generally would default to being kind of happy and would focus on whatever work he was given as long as it wasn't too difficult for him. He loved making picture books. However, he was easily distracted by other kids, even more easily frustrated, and he always took the bait whenever someone tried to rile him up. So one day we get a new girl whom I'll call Amy, who is a special kind of unstable. She's clearly intelligent, but has severe issues, and has been placed with us because she tried to assault faculty at her previous school. Upon learning she did really well on a writing assignment, she once said, "I don't know why people are always surprised that I'm smart. All I tried to do was bite the principal." Anyway, the kids have individualized work time and Amy has already finished her packet and is looking around the room with instigation face. My co-teacher and I are already helping a couple other kids out, and I know I need to get something else for her to do shortly, but it's too late because I hear her yell, "What the fuck are you smiling at, fatus?" And I see that she's just yelled at Kevin, who sometimes kind of spaces out when it's quiet with this big smile. Kevin realizes she's addressing him and he states the obvious and reminds her that she's fat too. She flips a desk and starts screaming at him while swinging her chair in front of her. Kevin starts screaming at her, but he has friends in the class who are trying to restrain him. So now we have 2 obese kids shrieking that the other is fat, while the rest of the room is divided between students heckling both of them, but mostly Amy. Girls threatening to beat Amy if she doesn't shut the fuck up. A couple kids annoyed that their work time has been interrupted, and kids who are excited to see where this is going. As teachers, and to short ladies, my co-teacher and I were forbidden contractual to intervene once situations escalated toward potential violence, and there was no way we could yell over 8 agitated screaming high school kids. So my co-teacher pressed the button that summoned co's, while I stood with a few kids who were genuinely scared. Anyway, Amy is so much smarter than Kevin, and she keeps the insults coming faster than he can process them, and he's getting more and more upset, so that now he's in tears and his face is all snotty, and he's screaming until his voice breaks, and then suddenly he lets out this loud, unmistakable wet fart that silences the room, and then it becomes clear that this fart was also shit. Kevin breaks out into a huge smile and starts laughing. All of the kids run to corners of the room as the smell is overwhelming and horrible. Shit is trickling down Kevin's leg, and he is just howling with laughter at this point. My co-teacher vomits into the trash can next to the desk. The co and the assistant principal show up just then, see what's going on, and the co's realize there is shit involved, and they know they don't get paid enough to deal with that. Everything is pandemonium, until the assistant principal says calmly, "Kevin, do you need to get on the bus?" Kevin stops laughing and goes into full tantrum mode and starts screaming, "Why do I gotta get on the bus?" Shit is flying out of his pant legs. He is legit laying in shit, and at this point we are finally permitted to let the kids out of the room and into the cafeteria because fuck that. Kevin wasn't back again after that day, and I hope that he was able to go somewhere that would help him, but I'm afraid it's more likely he has since been incarcerated. As a student, probably my entire senior class. In Connecticut there's a common senior game called either Assassins or Water Wars. It's pretty simple. You and a friend are a team. You're assigned to assassinate another team, while another team is assigned to assassinate you. All secret, of course. Each team pays $10 to play. Winner gets the pot, usually around $500 or more. You assassinate other players by using water guns, water balloons, basically anything you can use to wet another person. You can play anywhere that's not school grounds, no zero tolerance gun bullshit, not the target's place of work, and you can't enter their home without permission. That's it. Everywhere else is fair game. There's only one road that you can enter and exit the school from, which is also a main road for people to travel to work in the morning, so it's generally a traffic shitshow every day. One team decided they would get their target on her way to school, so they got up at 5 AM, put on black camouflage clothes, put on black war paint on their faces, and hid behind some bushes of a house's front yard with pink super soakers. While waiting, the owner of the house saw them through her window and thought they were terrorists. This was the spring after 9/11. Cut to 9 AM. I come into school late because I have senior privilege and the school's on lockdown. I'm greeted at the door by a cop with a hand on his gun, who looks over my backpack and sends me directly to the auditorium. I'm totally confused for an hour until finally the entire senior class is sent to the auditorium for an emergency assembly. The school principal and the chief of police are there and are pissed. They're yelling at us that this game has terrorized the town and that we all should be ashamed and blah blah blah. They threaten that any minor caught playing with any form of water guns in town would immediately be arrested. Lol what? And then demand that the senior class give the jackpot money to the principal immediately. The class erupted into a massive fuck you mentality and immediately began calling out the police and the principal on their bullshit. Students gave no fucks and walked up to the front of the assembly to start insulting the cops, the principal, and explaining how they had no actual legal stance to threaten anything they were trying to enforce, and that parents and their lawyers will get involved if they push it. They pushed it, so the entire class again told them to fuck themselves, and our second senior ditch happened. The team that caused all the mess, which, honestly, fucking idiots who ruined it for everyone, got expelled for a couple days until their parents' lawyers reminded the school that, since this was a non-school related incident, they couldn't legally do that. They were allowed back, but had a very uncomfortable end to their senior year. The faculty hated our class. They didn't want to come to graduation, but were obligated due to their employment. The principal didn't last long after our class graduated, and the class after us didn't get to play as far as we heard. As for the money, the remaining kids in the game went to the local park for a water fight and gave the money to the winners there. It was the biggest fuck you to the school system and police department my town had ever seen from students. I worked in a really rough school and have tons of stories. One third grader didn't want to line up for the water fountain after a hot recess. He wanted to jump the line and get his water first. Well, my colleague tells him to get to the back of the line, BC no cutting, and the little fucker picked up a chair, whipped it at my friend, and shattered the glass in the classroom door. Kid didn't even flinch or act like he felt like he was in it or anything. Two more. This one is funny. I was teaching science to the 5th graders. I'm white, so my students, 98% African American, loved it when I would flush red with exercise, embarrassment, or even from something rubbing my neck, like a seatbelt, and leaving a red mark. The kids were fascinated by my ability to be red. Anyway, teaching science, kid raises his hand, and completely off topic goes, "Hey, Miss So-and-so, are you a virgin?" Well, you can imagine I was so shocked, and immediately turned bright red, so then the whole class starts laughing. It was pretty funny, so I laughed too. Little shit. Last one. Huge girl, 12 years old, 160 pounds, 5 feet 9 in my 5th grade class. This chick was 100% developed and matured. Another girl 5th grader 4 feet 4, 55 pounds maximum. Not even close to puberty. These two get in a fist fight right before lunch. Obvious the big girl is murdering the smaller one. There is a policy about not getting involved, but big girl was starting to slam little girl's head into the metal lockers. So I felt I had to intervene. I grab little girl by the waist and pull her out of big girl's reach and place her to the side. Big girl comes at me like a raging bull. She punched me square in my mouth. Hurt like hell. Busted my lip a little. The whole class is like ooh. In the quiet I said to her, "Stop. Do you realize you've just hit a teacher?" She just jumped at me and ripped a good sized chunk of my hair out. No joke. She got suspended for a couple of days, but that's it. They asked if I wanted to press charges, but I was scared to be a white teacher pressing charges against a 12 years old girl in that neighborhood. She was removed from my class at my request though. Hate to be one of those not a teacher people, but there was this kid, let's call him Mo, in my class who was really big for a kid his age. He was very popular with both the teachers and the kids, and was one of the clowns in the class, always making people laugh, etc. He was also quite a hustler. One day he started this magnet selling business in the school. He'd make custom ones, or he'd just sell the round magnets. He also had some magnets which looked like rocks, and these things were his best selling product, but they were also the scarcest. Very soon, fights started breaking out around the school over these rock magnets, and we were all called into the auditorium for assembly one morning where the headmaster warned us that they were looking into these magnet dealers. Emma had a little gang at this point, so he instructed these guys to start terrorizing the children and the school to behave and whatnot. They eventually policed the school so they could continue selling magnets. They would clamp down on any fight, including fights that were caused by bullies, and they'd usually target the victim of the bullies. One of the groups of Imo's thugs pulled a young kid into a corner, where he was held down by two boys whilst another whipped his dick out, and threatened that he would make him suck it, if he catches him fighting again. This kid beat the fuck out of these thugs with his lunchbox. Some boys and I actually stopped this fight and the teachers took over where they discovered a bit about this magnet syndicate. That suck my dick kid was expelled. Anyway, the school didn't know who the ringleader was, but they slowly started catching Emo's crew one by one. One day, during geography class a student walked in to tell our lovely teacher that Emo needed to go to the headmaster's office. Emo panics and starts refusing to budge. Our teacher, who was being sweet as ever, was gently trying to coerce him, comforting him and letting him know that it might not be trouble and that he shouldn't worry if he's done nothing. She was maybe in her 70s and was the tiniest woman whilst Emo towered over her. Emo got really frustrated with her, so he got up, flung her to the board where she tripped on a desk, landing on her arm breaking both the bones in them. He punched her twice whilst screaming that he didn't want to go and that he knew it was because he was in trouble. He then fled, literally climbed over the school walls, and we never saw him again. None of us were told what happened to him either, so I cannot say. We heard that his family moved back to Pakistan, but it was all just speculation. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen in school, let alone the biggest meltdown. Oh yeah, our geography teacher had to have surgery done on those broken bones and had to get stitches in her mouth. I can't remember if one of her teeth from her dentures broke off and pierced her lip, or if they just cut her, but that was pretty scary for us to witness her on the ground bleeding everywhere with a banana-shaped forearm. She would eventually start telling kids different stories about the scar she got. She was awesome. TLDR, kid started a gang selling magnets terrorized the school, beat up a teacher, and fled the school when they clamped down on his gang and called him in for questioning. Edit. Now that this story popped into my head, I was just chatting to an old classmate about it. Turns out Mo was caught by one of the bus drivers during his daring escape, met with the headmaster, where his parents were called in, and he was expelled for assaulting the teacher. Apparently we were told this the next day, but I don't recall this at all. Had a special needs kid with a para in class. This para and I struggled to get this kid to participate in class. No matter what I did lesson plan wise, he would not bite. I guess the para was having a bad day and decided to scold the kid for not participating. I can kind of see this clusterfuck of a situation brewing out of the corner of my eye, but I have confidence in the para to handle it. While I'm explaining an activity, the student stands up, slams his belongings to the ground and shouts, "Fuck you, you homosexual old man." He was referencing the paragraph. The entire class and I stared at this man. I looked at the para and his jaw was to the ground. I was a young teacher, I literally didn't know how to handle this situation. The student then grabbed some of his stuff, leaving behind worksheets and other small stuff. He walks out the door and slams it shut. The para runs after him, and they decide to have a blow-up argument outside my classroom. I had to shout to cover up the conversation. Once the activity got started, I begged the students to talk to cover up the argument. I stepped out into the hallway to figure out what on earth was going on. I step out to this student, shirtless, his bag and stuff tossed around the hallways, and this student has his fists up. The para got him into a choke hold until the student calmed down to the point of not fighting. The student got suspended for a few days for attempting to fight. I was so shocked and had no idea what to do. First time as a teacher, I felt helpless. Thankfully the para was trained and could handle that student. I'm pretty sure I've posted this story before, but I'll do it again. I'm not a teacher, but I was a camp counselor, so pretty much the same thing, but in the great outdoors, plus you have to share the same cabin with 6 kids for several weeks. Thank God it's not a year-round gig. We had this kid, let's call him Van, who would come for sailing lessons all the time, and his parents had mentioned in his bio that he often got bullied for how he acted because of his severe ADHD. So we kept an eye on how he got along with other kids and tried to make sure nobody bullied him. A few weeks into the session, we are taking a multi-day trip to a nearby lake, camping on the islands and stuff. Van signs up. By the time we had sailed to our first campsite and set it up, I started to realize that whenever Van got bullied, it was right after he had been saying mean stuff to the other kids. It kept happening into the middle day, so I pulled him aside and told him he wouldn't get picked on if he didn't pick on everyone else constantly. How he might actually make a friend. He says it's his ADHD. I point out that I have ADHD and I don't go around being an asshole, so he says he'll work on it. Bad behavior continues. We are unloading the gear and putting the boats on trailers the final day. Everybody is helping but Van. I ask him to help like everyone else. Kid fucking explodes. You never take my side and make me do work that my parents are paying you to do. Starts punching me in the face, breaks my knockoff Ray-Bans, and throws them in the lake. He was only 15, so I couldn't hit him, but thankfully some of the older campers subdued him, and we got on our way. It took him beating up one of the kids who corroborated my side of the story with management to finally get him kicked out. The parents offered to replace my Ray-Bans, but my dumbass didn't see this golden opportunity for payback and admitted they were fake. Kids' parents were your average absent parent new money trash. I honestly feel bad for him, but I'm also pretty salty I didn't make them buy me some nice sunglasses. TL. Dr. I got beat up by a camper and missed an opportunity to replace my fake Ray-Bans with real ones. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe the channel.